Thank you very much for coming. I'm your MC, Malcolm. Let's kick this off. These summits, we're on tour. Just like Taylor Swift, we're on tour, okay? There is a Taylor Swift reference too. It is totally legit, all right? I'm just gonna bring that up. So Toronto is the second event of this tour. Last month, we were in Palo Alto, and in the coming months, we have sold out shows in Calgary and Vancouver. Perfect. So what is a micro summit? Well, this is an exclusive venue for all of you to get close and intimate with the ideas and the innovation and the vision of Queen's researchers and academics. Fabulous opportunity for you to network. Now, this is a 2-day event, and for each of these events, we have a theme. And the theme is gonna be about innovation and disruption. The theme for this summit is the combination of media and law. And more notably, how AI is set to disrupt all of this and innovate. Now, I'm your MC, I'm Malcolm White. You may ask, what is my connection with media and law? And I'll just say this, Your Honor, I'm not a real lawyer, but I do play one on TV. No, I'm not, I couldn't resist that line. No, I am alumni. I studied media at Queen's, and I've been an investor in innovation for the last 25 years, traveling the world, investing in innovative companies. And about 10 years ago, I pulled a Rodney Dangerfield and went back to school. And I went back to school to study AI so I could be more conversant and understand the topic and understand where I needed to be invested in. So that is my connection to AI. I will say this though, the best investment I ever made in my career had nothing to do with my day job. It actually had to do with Queen's, because as an alumni, through a donation, I actually seeded the funds to create a new course. That course was Film 450. And the purpose of that course was to educate Queen's students on the rapid changes that were going on in the global media space because of digitalization and disruption, and to get them prepared and to actually network with people outside of the university, people in the industry, to actually get them prepared for their careers. And I just wanted to say this program has been a phenomenal success. 15 years in the running, and most importantly, the alumni from that program have become icons in their respective industry internationally, and more importantly, they've come back to Queen's. They've come back to Queen's to contribute, which has been an amazing effort, paying it forward and bringing it back to the school. So very, very proud of the accomplishments and the returns we've had with that particular program. So thank you. I'd like to introduce this venue, which is a fabulous one. I've been dying to come here, and again, the whole complex has had many accolades. The Arcadius Earth's mission is to drive sustainable change through art, technology, and community engagement. That is a fabulous mission statement, and I hope that this venue inspires you to align with the values of this mission. I'd like to first start with a territorial acknowledgement. Here in Toronto, we acknowledge that the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat people, many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people, and we acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. Now, I have some housekeeping as well. There is an accessible, gender-neutral washroom on this floor. I checked it out. It smells like cinnamon. It does exist. In terms of photos, if you capture any photos, Just wanted to say that they will be posted on all the respective Queen's social media sites. I'm hoping that photos of mine are altered using AI to make me look the 20/20 vision, 20 years younger and 20% less gray hair. But I actually will say that the AI was used for the archival footage that we did see, so it does have a real use. Also wanted to say too that the full recording will be available on Queen's social media programs, Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Great. So the agenda for tonight, we have 3 Queen's researchers. They're going to share their visions of the future in a talk that's around 20 minutes in length. If you're joining us tomorrow night, we're going to have a fireside chat. It's going to include dinner, private tours of the museum, exclusive Q&A with our researchers, and more importantly, cocktails. If you're only available for tonight, fear not. We will have time after the event where you can engage with the speakers. And with that, I am going to introduce our first 2 speakers. From the Queen's Faculty of Arts and Science, Dr. Scott MacKenzie is Department Head of Film and Queen's. He is recognized as an expert in environmental media, global circumpolar northern documentaries, and activist media. His recent research focuses on Arctic cinema, visualization of climate change, media and the welfare state, national and transnational identities. Joining him will be Dr. Bill Nelson. He's a population ecologist combining math modeling with experimenting in aquatic and terrestrial systems. Bill's recent work explores how insect life histories respond to climate change, evolve resistance to insecticides, and strategies to manage evolutional resistance. Please welcome Dr. Scott MacKenzie and Dr. Bill Nelson. Thank you.
Thank you for the welcome, Malcolm. All right, so the topic for tonight, or at least one of them, is AI, artificial intelligence. And I don't think anyone in the room has not heard how awfully pernicious it is and how it will destroy every aspect of our lives. From deepfake photos of Taylor Swift, which seems to be an emergent theme tonight, to stolen IP, intellectual property, to the creation of songs by artists that, the artists never made the songs themselves. They're just pastiches. These stories circulate in the media all the time. And while it's really important to note all of these things and all the different ways that AI can be used in a multifarious of really, really malevolent ways, there's other ways we can think about it too, which we'll get to in a second.
So a lot of the examples we're going to share today come from is inspired by the research that we do, which is in the area of climate change and the environment. And this is one of the examples we're going to start with. This is an image that's generated by artificial intelligence, and it shows windmills off the shoreline and a dead whale on the beach. And this is created by a grassroots organization who is trying to stop windmills in Eastern Australia. And what they're trying to do is connect, obviously, the idea that windmills are killing whales. Biologically, that's not true. Whales don't go near these in the ocean, so this is really just misinformation. What they tried to do is pair this with a research article to change the minds of the people in their municipality. And that went across the Pacific to North America. It was picked up in New York State, and they tried to do the same thing there. Even picked up by Donald Trump in some of the stump speeches in the last election, and all of it is fake.
I know, this is all depressing. But we want to take a different tact tonight and talk about the possibilities, the positive possibilities of artificial intelligence and the way in which it can help change the world in a positive sense. Bill and I are both many things, but one thing we share is optimism. And so we want to talk about the ways in which it can be used in this way. And a place to begin is where we work. In the fields we work in, Bill is a scientist, I'm a humanist, and one of the things that AI can do, as we'll be talking about over the next little while, is find ways to bring the sciences and the humanities together, right? And that is centrally important to deal with any of the major issues that face us today, including climate change. That can't happen, or change can't happen there without change in science and humanities. Part of what we also want to think about in terms of AI is how to break down the silos that exist between the sciences and the humanities. Find better ways for us to talk to each other, and in so doing, find better ways at a time when the universities in the Anglo-American world are under threat to talk to publics about what we do and its value in tandem.
As Scott said, we see AI as a powerful tool to help bridge the humanities and the sciences where we really suffer from an inability to work together. So part of the reason in our own fields, we use different words to represent the same idea, or the same words sometimes to represent different ideas. And AI is very good at managing across those divides, better than we are, because we come with a lot of biases and culture from our disciplines. So that's just an example of how it can work. We see it as an opportunity to help us, the humanities and sciences, work in parallel more, so that we can be more than the sum of our parts. And if we do it right, it helps with integrating as well to prevent misinformation in the things we're going to share with science communication.
Okay, so where do we start here? If we think about climate change, or indeed the ways in which science communicates publicly, there's two models that we're probably very familiar with. One, down this wall, is what we can call the spectacular. As you can see, we got polar bears, we got snow. The polar bears look kind of charming, even though they will eat you. And they're sort of anthropomorphized. What they're trying to represent when they're used in images of climate change activism are ways by which to get you emotionally involved with their plight. The science and data underneath climate change are not represented over here at all, but this is a spectacular image that's often used in that way.
And in contrast, from the science side, we're often generating images that are about the metrical. So this is a nice example of it. It shows a figure that's the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere over the last 600,000 years. So we're seeing multiple ice ages go by. And you also see a line that shows the temperature through those time. The point of this image is to put those two things together. When CO2 is higher, temperature's higher in the historical record. When CO2 is lower, temperature's lower. So in there, the science process is visible, along with the data. So the data is showing many ice ages, and what you can see is the trends up and down in the normal cycle that we'd have through glaciation events. And that helps set the stage how we can use this more effectively, but there's very little in emotion here.
So the way that we can prove that what we're saying is true is when you looked at the metrical here, who had a tear come to their eye? Right? It's certainly empirical and it's certainly data-driven, but it doesn't move in that way. And that's one of the limitations of the metrical. Same with the spectacular. You can be moved by the plight of the polar bears, and you ought to be. But images of emaciated polar bears do not translate into how to engage in social, political, scientific, and critical action around the questions of climate change. What we need is a way that both of these can be mobilized at the same time. That's the bridge between the sciences and the humanities, right? And that's what makes AI an aggregator for this kind of work.
And this figure in particular is one from Al Gore's An Inconvenience Truth from 25 years ago. And it's the first stage where we're trying to put the spectacular and the metric together. And so this is going to be a launching point for how we're thinking about artificial intelligence, being able to do this more in the future. So we're going to show an example today where AI is both a really important science tool and also a really important integrator between the spectacular and the metrical, which is taking ideas from the humanities and sciences. So this example starts on the side wall here. It is a picture of the Alps, of the biggest glacier in the Alps. And you can see the mountaineers walking up this glacier. And as you're doing that, that is a slow-moving river of ice. It's grinding the rock underneath it, slowly pouring down into the valleys. This glacier right now is much smaller than it used to be. How do we know that? If these mountaineers were to go up the sides of the mountains, you can see the scrape marks from where the glaciers used to be, and then you can see areas where there wasn't any scraping. So you can identify very easily where the highest point of the glaciation was in areas past, or in times past. And so scientists have been working in this area to try and develop models of glaciation. The reason, if we can develop it here where there's really good data and get it right, then we can start to apply it to areas where we don't have good data, and there's still some faith that we're going to do a good job of predicting it. So this particular glacier has been the site or the focus of a lot of data to try and develop these mathematical models. These models are complex. They have the physics of how snow is formed into ice, how ice builds, how that pressure forces the ice down the valleys and how it flows out, and how the ice is lost at the end, either the ocean or by melting. And interestingly, the research in this has never been able to get it right. They've always developed the models, and it takes a lot to simulate the predictions we'll talk about in a moment, but they always predict ice sheets that are way higher than's ever been observed. And so recently, a group of researchers decided to try and use AI to tackle this instead. And so they developed an AI model, trained it on data that was physics-based in other areas, and they took that model and applied it here. And it did a really good job of predicting the correct location. So that's a huge step forward in terms of our understanding of what the physics is most important for these areas. And as a scientist, in my day-to-day visualization creation, I like to make images like this, which is the metrical. So on the x-axis here, you can see the elevation that's observed for the mountaineers going up the sides of the mountains. And the y-axis here is the AI prediction. Each of these dots is a location, it's a site in the mountains, and the different colors are different studies. And then there's a line that says 1-to-1, and that's what we're looking for. It's a really good relationship. So for me as a scientist, I look at that, and I'm excited because all the evidence behind the assertion that AI has been able to capture these very complex processes is embedded in the picture. But it doesn't do anything to move you emotionally, and it doesn't contain any signaling to what the processes are.
So, and Bill mentioned earlier Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. And the still that we were going to use isn't in the mix, but the one that Bill showed is like a good approximation to the type of thing that was used in that work. You may remember that there's a hockey stick graph on XY axis, and Al Gore is standing off to the side on a hydraulic lift going up to the top of it, showing just how bad things are going to get, right? That's an early instantiation of the way in which the metrical and the spectacular can come together, that the data, like the XY axis, is then turned into something that has an emotional impact because Al Gore is on a hydraulic lift. We're arguing or postulating that with the development of AI, this can be done all the more. And this machine learning model is an example of that. This brings together the data that Bill is talking about, along with the intrepid explorers who are walking along the glacier, and turns it into an image which can move and can both demonstrate the scientific data underneath it, where the scrapings are happening along the formations and what have you, but also show the flow of the glacier itself through the middle.
So when we think of artificial intelligence and we think of openness we think of openness in terms of the data. I should back up. When we think of AI and the use of it, we're thinking about openness, and it's something that we want to recognize that there's challenges with this, because if we make things very open, then there's going to be misuse of the data, and there's going to be intellectual property as well, and we're talking about compensation for the people who are doing the work. However, on the positive side, AI needs or benefits from having openness in all parts. It has openness in data, needs a lot of data to create the AI models. So imagine we're trying to create an AI of climate change and you don't have data from Canada. It's going to be really hard to do that. So the more open data means a better ability as scientists to be able to use that to develop the models. The AI models themselves, we want those open as well. So in the previous example, the AI model was the science. It was the actual abstraction of the idea of how the physics worked, because what it did is it weighed what was important to look at and what was important to not look at in the physics of it. So it is the final science, and we want that open so that other scientists can take it and build on it and develop it further. And then the products that are generated from AI, the simulations, the images, and the text, the more that those are open, the easier they are to share and spread the impact of what we're trying to do.
So at this point, you may wonder with good reason, what does this have to do with law? And one of the things that intersects here, as Bill is saying, is the notion of open access and IP. These are two concepts that are related, but at times at odds with each other, right? IP is intellectual property, and again, as we said up front, we are concerned with the ways in which AI can use the work of artists and content creators without compensation to create new things. Open access, on the other hand, which comes out of university models, is essentially a concept where what you produce and the data that it's built on all has to be available to other researchers. This is the type of model we would like to see, not simply in terms of AI inputs, but outputs. And by that, as Bill was saying, there's these different stages of generation you can have with AI outputs around, say, modeling of climate change. And we don't want to postulate that you use this data and you make an image and that's the end of the story. Indeed, we want the images to be generative, right? And so a move away from just simply creating something that transparently or not so transparently conveys data, but instead is something that becomes a catalyst for conversations, for new projects, for new communities to arise around the output, whether they're simulations or text or images or models, right? So the image becomes decentered, and instead the communities that dialogue and debate in political, cultural, critical ways come to the forefront, whether humanists or scientists, but most, we would hope, both together, and the public.
And so we think of it in terms of science communication. What we're trying to do is move past just sharing information. We're trying to move past just trying to create emotions in people. And like Scott said, we're trying to move to a point where there can be dialogue that's generated in what people are looking at. Because once we do that, we have engagement in the problem and we can get a change in the behaviors. So AI can help with that. It is very good at handling a large amount of data. It's very good at handling different kinds of data and helping us bridge the gap between the humanities and the sciences that we as researchers find difficult to bridge ourselves. It's good at dealing with very serious, a lot of complexity, and ending up with things that we can use that are more straightforward, and it helps us, in the end, make visible the invisible.
Now, and one of the things that we think about as we develop these thoughts and models is the fact that if we look at, say, the theories of media, right, all of them show that simply watching a film, a documentary, data visualization, what have you, does not change one's mind. There's not a direct injection, as it were, of ideas. What needs to happen instead is that multiple images are made, multiple modes of communication are engaged in to get past not just the siloing we're talking about in terms of the humanities and the sciences, but the siloing we see develop more and more every day in our own societies. To find ways to have modes of communication about the most important things of the day based on data and based on, emotion that allow for conversations that are not happening to now happen. And around climate change, that is one of the things that is totally siloed and where people often speak, whether humanists or scientists who are into this or find this important, in silos. It's a way of trying to transcend those silos. And so our goal then is to move both hearts and minds through AI to bring about change.
And so for Scott and I, Scott as a scholar in communications and media, and myself as a scholar in population biology, being able to work across the humanities has been a really important thing for us. And we see this, especially the use of AI to facilitate it, as an important avenue of exploration that we're going to be stepping into in the future in general. Being in a Faculty of Arts and Science is a really important part of that. We are one of the few in Canada, and that means that we get to have these conversations both in teaching and research, and this is where innovation comes from. So we see this as an important way that we're going to be moving forward in both the teaching and the research areas.
And one last thing that I should have said earlier but forgot to, is one of the things that we can do, say, in Arts and Science at Queen's, and is central to bringing about these types of changes, is by using AI to break down these silos and to bring rationality, or the metrical, and the spectacular together, is not simply to transform the way in which we communicate science to publics, but out of necessity, it'll transform what happens in the humanities and the sciences, how we think of our own disciplines and how we work together. And that's the type of transformational change we need for the future.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was great. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thanks, Scott. Couldn't agree more. I was just at a conference, the NVIDIA GTC conference, last week, and we saw this incredible convergence on the climate side, just using AI to do robust climate simulations, Earth 2, actually even using illustrative techniques like stable diffusion to simulate climate, like the climate predictions for Taiwan, the island of Taiwan. So we're seeing a great deal of convergence, a need for interdisciplinary studies here, and great results. And Scott, I do also have to agree that anyone who's been up north knows polar bears don't want to hug you, they really just want to eat you. So yeah, totally agree. Excellent. So with that, I am going to move on to our next speaker, the very esteemed Dr. Samuel Dahan. All right, so I'm going to attempt to read this with this moire pattern here. Dr. Samuel Dahan is an associate professor of law at Queen's University and an adjunct professor at Cornell Law School. He directs the Conflicts Analytics Lab, which focuses on AI research in law and conflict resolution. He served as the chief of policy and the chair for global employment, and also was a cabinet minister in the EU Court of Justice and a policy advisor at the European Commission. He leads the development of AI legal systems, My Open Court, and cyber justice, and has received the Stanley Corbett Award for Teaching Excellence and the Informs UPS Prize for AI and Analytics. His research appears in top legal journals and has been featured in Business Insider, Bloomberg, and Global News. Please welcome Dr. Samuel Dahan.
Think about Emily. She's a seasoned professional. She's been working for a company for the last 2 decades. She got into a fight with her boss, and he decides he's going to fire her, which is perfectly acceptable according to Canadian employment law. However, he has to offer severance and reasonable notice of termination. So he comes up with a very unattractive package. She's a smart lady, and she's like, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to court. Okay. A few weeks later, she goes to court, and she feels confident that AI can help. So she goes to Copilot and decides to generate her court submission and asks if Copilot can generate a bunch of case law to support her argument. Eventually, she goes to court, submit her claims. She's pretty confident, but a few weeks later, she gets invited to a hearing, and the judge is not very happy about it because 9 out of 10 cases are fabricated. So problem is that it's been happening quite frequently over the last few years, and in fact, a few months ago, a couple in BC, I think they were in the middle of a tenant-landlord dispute, something like that. Anyway, 9 out of 10 cases were hallucinated. So, but interestingly, a lot of lawyers also get in trouble. In New York, in Ontario, in BC, in Australia, and some of them might be disbarred because they've been generating a lot of court documents and citing fake cases. Side joke, I think a lot of lawyers have been hallucinating cases, not using AI. That's not a new problem. It's just that they were never caught, and it was not as problematic as it used to. Anyway, bottom line is that if lawyers get caught and they make that mistakes, obviously a lot of unrepresented litigants are going to make that mistake. And that's a huge problem for courts because we thought a few years ago, wow, that's amazing. I mean, AI can generate contracts, it can generate court documents, but that's if you're creating a lot of low-quality document, very long, very eloquent, very sexy, but then you're adding more work to the courts, which are already quite overwhelmed. So you're basically adding more barriers to justice. And that's what ChatGPT is doing and many of the other AIs. So the key question for us, I mean, researchers, lawyers, computer scientists, technologists, as some people call us, is what do we do about this? I mean, do we build something better? Is it even possible? Justice and technology are at a crossroads. I mean, on the one hand, access to justice is a real problem in Canada, in the US, in Europe. There's a lot of evidence on that. Okay. Did you know that in 50% of Canadian court cases, at least one of the parties is not represented by a lawyer? And that's the problem with Emily. She's not rich, she's not poor. And because of that legal gray zone, she does not qualify for legal aid. And that's the case for everyone, pretty much. I mean, the middle class, all of us. Even I can't afford myself if I went back to practice. So what do you do about this? Is that even acceptable in 2025? So there's a bit of a question here. So something needs to be done. And people are going to be using Google and GPT because that's what is available. So but the question is, can we do something a little bit better with that? So AI can draft, can do a lot of very cool things. Even you may have heard that GPT-4 passed the bar. It did, and it scored in the top 10%. Okay, so a few months ago, that claim was questioned, and a lot of these statements, a lot of these conclusions were kind of debunked. Okay, so that's important to think about it. But even let's say that's true, that's an accurate statement. These are accurate findings. Taking the bar is a bit of a different thing than being a lawyer. I mean, there are a lot of different things, that involve being a lawyer, lawyering skills, and you could argue that, that says maybe a lot about the bar exam. Maybe we should rethink how we test our young trainees. I see some of my former students here. Shouldn't say that. With that said, so legal professionals are skeptical, and they're right to be. So, but there's a lot of investment in AI. The Stanford AI Index report published a few months ago that AI investment in 2023, from 2023 went from $3 billion to $25 billion in 2025. It's obviously not everything, that's not all going in law and compliance, but a lot of it is going in law. So what are we doing here? Are we building technology that's not really helping, even actually can do harm, and we're pouring a lot of money into it? So the question for us is, can we do better? Can we refine the way AI is being designed? And there are a lot of ideas, we've tried, let's add some data and connect legal data to language model. Let's build our own language model. We did that, but unfortunately it didn't work so much. So recently we came up with a new project called Open Justice. And think about it as an AI creation platform. Imagine if you're a legal professional and you can build your own AI in plain language. Just that's it. You write code, you think, you explain how the system has to think, you ingest the knowledge, and then it learns from you, but not from the knowledge from your experience. So it started as a community in 2021 and evolved into a system where you can build reasoning and you can open the hood. So let's think about Alex, a lawyer that wants to represent Emily. And he's an experienced lawyer and has, some cases, a couple of cases under his belt, but he wants to go further. He doesn't want to end up like Emily and using ChatGPT, but so he wants to use something that's designed for law. There's Open Justice, but there are many others, but he wants to push it further. So first step, it's going to identify the problem. I want to be negotiating a good wrongful termination package for my client. Okay, so how do I go about it? Okay, so then what happens is Open Justice opens the hood and allows Alex to refine the system and maybe choose one of the mainstream language models like GPT, Claude, or other, even our model. But then what's important is that on top of this, he has to be doing something about it. So what Open Justice does is that it's allowing him to upload data. So for example, court materials, even personal notes from past mediations and negotiations. And it will be connected eventually to any language language model. So, but what's more important here, you see, is not only adding data. What we've been doing in the legal industry and in many other industries, we think, okay, but ChatGPT doesn't know anything about law because it's trained on the entire internet, but the internet is 90% garbage, so that's why it doesn't work. If we sprinkle a bit of data that are medical or law, it's going to suddenly become smart. But that's not the reality of it. The reality requires a lot of work. We need to have experts, so bankers, doctors, lawyers, getting involved into the operating system. That's a very exciting idea. That means you don't need to be a computer scientist to code, because you can do it. There's a lot of natural language interface, and a lot of people like us are working on what we call conversion algorithms, basically helping you to write in English or French or any other languages and build something. So now, and then it gets translated into a platform like this one. So for example, Alex now deploys his AI. Let's say he built something in the area of wrongful dismissal, and then he got to test it, and it compares like how ChatGPT performs, and you may see that there's a massive difference. But the reality of it is it's not necessarily superior, it's not necessarily better, but what's important here is control, is guardrails. I mean, I've been in this space for 10 years, and we've been talking about AI ethics and guardrails, but the problem is that computer scientists are building guardrails, but then don't know what is a good guardrail in law. So we need to have professionals, like people who have expertise in the area, to get involved, and it has to be beyond prompting. Prompting is cute, is nice, but it's very much based on consumer analytics. Consumer analytics is pretty much like, Amazon knows that you like something, but it's binary. AI in law, AI in medicine is much more complex. There's a lot of reasoning, so we need to open up the system to allow professionals to get involved and get their hands dirty and work on how the system really operates. Okay, so that's kind of cute. That's an interesting platform. But the question is, how do we take it to the next step? Okay, we're a bunch of researchers, so that's a very, very basic interface. So now the idea for us is, how do we help professionals to take it to the next step and to deploy that kind of system into the everyday workflow? So in courts, we work with courts, law firms, pro bono organizations, and we realized that a lot of them actually need very different things. So, for example, legal aid organizations like Pro Bono Ontario, they receive thousands of phone calls every week. They can't use a chatbot. That's too much. Like, they're not going to be finding that very useful. So you need to rethink the way these products are deployed. So for example, how do they go about it? We're building a speech-to-text recognition system that processes all the calls. Then Open Justice API organizes the request based on those that have already been answered, new questions, complex questions, urgent questions, and it creates a to-do list of how you should go about it next. But here, so the idea is not only to dump legal knowledge, it's to help to create a collective legal intelligence where a community can make contribution and organizations can build on their internal and previous experience. The reality of law, for those of you who practice law, is like 90% of cases are decided through settlement. So a lot of organizations are sitting on a lot of internal data, and that's what matters the most. Like if you're a transactional lawyer, if you're an employment lawyer, what matters is your experience. Yes, the knowledge is key, and there are already plenty of tools like Canly and a lot of open access platforms are there with a lot of raw knowledge. What's missing, and that's also missing for our students, is the experience that can be integrated into that system, and especially for those students who don't have access to the classic mentorship avenues, they need to be able to access that knowledge. So now the question is, why this matters so much to us? I think I want to go back to this example of people using GPT to go to court. This is going to be growing at an incredible pace. I mean, there are some studies already showing that by 2030, 90% of the internet will be AI generated. So the problem is that how do we expect courts to be dealing with that? It's impossible. So they need another AI tool to screen AI generated. Yes, I know that's a crazy idea, but that's the reality of it. And if no one does it, I mean, that's going to be coming from open source initiative. So what's very important to us is that it is open source. What does this mean? That means the community, so the legal community owns it. It's not accessible to non-lawyers because we're worried that they might be using it. It's not perfect, and it needs to be built. It needs to be developed by the community. I mean, it can be, the idea is almost like a little bit like a marketplace, an online forum. It's a little bit of how it started. And it can be shared with your peers. For example, that lawyer, he might find another lawyer in Kingston or Toronto that already worked on a similar problem, and they're willing to share their mediation or negotiation experience. I think that's a pretty cool idea. I mean, it doesn't have to be raw knowledge. It could be more subtle, and a platform like Open Justice could distill the knowledge and remove confidential information to protect, obviously, the privacy of the clients and also the secret sauce of the lawyers, because after all, they don't have to share everything. I mean, their competitive advantage is based on their experience. So what we're trying to do is a little bit more than building an AI. There are plenty of great companies that are doing that. What we're trying to do is, as a legal tech community, but what's really exciting for us is a legal tech community that's made of both computer scientists and practitioners and lawyers. So we've got about 20,000 queries per month. About 500 experts are registered and making daily contributions. We've got very random projects. People in Nairobi building contract law models, in Nigerian law. We've got people in Australia working on various projects. It's pretty much an open project. Anybody can contribute. We've got some guardrails, obviously. So, but this idea is very exciting. It's probably one of the most exciting projects I've ever worked on. I mean, this idea that you can build technology without coding. I think that's probably a very interesting project, but very hard and very challenging. It's never been done in the past. There are plenty of tech communities. I mean, there's Hugging Face, there's Red. I mean, there's tons of this. And a lot of organizations. I mean, DeepSeek. You may have heard of it. It's partially open source. But having lawyers or professionals that are not in the tech world to make a contribution, first, the technology was not there. This idea of conversion algorithms, turning natural language into AI, that was insane 3 years ago. But also maybe because people thought lawyers couldn't do it. I mean, lawyers were known for sharp writing skills, analytical skills, and also we like to argue, we like to fight. Okay, so maybe we're not really the best people to build stuff. Okay, but I think we can change that norm. We've been working, I mean, a lot of my students, so here, former students, we've been building things together with computer scientists, and there is a way to challenge that norm. So now you can argue, okay, so now the question for us is, why do I need the Queen's community? I mean, I think we are very excited to work with Queen's Grad, not only Queen's Grad, we work with everyone that's interested in making a contribution. And the idea is really to help us to build that shared knowledge, and I would even push this idea further, that shared experience, trying to build the experience into a shared machine that will be available to the community. So it's a growing movement. It's still small, we're still modest, and I wanted to share this experience with you because I think Queen's has been an amazing home to work on that project. The students both having a great computer science school, one of the top in the country, as well as having a great law school. I'm not saying this because my dean is here, but it's been a wonderful, and I'd love to engage more with the Queen's community. A lot of our projects are with former Queen's grad, both law firms, Pro Bono Ontario, and this is really an interesting experience to bridge that gap between research and practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samuel. I couldn't agree more. You know, this whole notion of interdisciplinary, I was asked, you know, who's the coder of the future? I said, the coder of the future is an English major that has a great grasp of linguistics. And that wasn't just a plug, the fact that I came from the arts and science faculty, but that's just the reality that you just need this incredible command of language to be able to do the prompt engineering described. And then more importantly, you need domain experts, and those domain experts can be in any one of these respective domains if you want to build one of these comprehensive systems. And these systems are so important to professionals. We're all buried with information. We love to have these productivity tools, but they need to be accurate and they need to be compliant. So thank you very much. This concludes the speakers for tonight. So thank you for everyone, Samuel, Bill, Scott. I'm going to give you a sneak preview of tomorrow where we get to continue the conversation and build on what we learned tonight. We're going to talk more about the future. We're going to have a fireside chat related to media and related to law. And with that, we hope to engage your support. Your support's incredibly important. Support from the Queen's community, just with regard to events like this and engagement with us. We are going to provide a chance for you to speak with these researchers, ask questions, and share your ideas to help them shape directions to take. All right, so the doors open tomorrow at 6 o'clock, and the fireside chat starts at 6:15. See you tomorrow. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the Queen's Micro Summit. Are you ready to climb the summit of knowledge and innovation? Yes, you are. I see that look. So this is night 2 of the summit. Who was here? Yes, excellent. Well, you set an incredibly high bar, okay? But we're going to try and top it tonight, all right? And what we've got for you is an incredibly engaging fireside, well, there's no fire, panel chat with these amazing researchers from Queen's University. So this is going to be a phenomenal night. What are micro summits? Well, micro summits are exactly this. It's a chance for you to have an exclusive, engaging, and intimate event with people and researchers from Queen's University to understand what they're thinking in terms of the future, innovation, ideas, and this is going to be a phenomenal session for you to ask and engage. So I'm very excited about this. This is the second part of our tour. We're on tour. We're on tour here. So this is the second venue, sold out, I might add. But we've got 2 more concert dates, okay? We're not Taylor Swift, but we got 2 more concert dates. There is a Taylor Swift joke here in this night you'll hear. And that will be in Calgary and Vancouver. So we're going to continue this the Micro Summit format here. It's phenomenal. So a few things I would just like to, before we get started, mention the land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the land of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. That the City of Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 of the Mississauga of the Credit, and I refer everyone back to the land acknowledgement in the lobby. With regard to land, I'd also like to credit actually the venue that we're here, this Acadia Earth. The mission of Acadia Earth is to inspire and educate everyone in terms of the environmental use of our land. I hope everyone had an engaging session as we toured exhibits. Fantastic. Excellent. Yeah, I was absolutely stunned by some of the visuals, et cetera. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm your MC, Malcolm. Easy to remember, Malcolm in the middle. Yeah. I'm a Queen's alumni from the media program. I'm an investor in innovation, have been for over 25 years. And I pulled a Rodney Dangerfield, went back to school, and studied AI for the last 10. So I'll be your moderator for the session, but the real stars are the people that I'm surrounding. And this is, again, day 2, so we get to continue the questioning experience here. And what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to get each of them to introduce themselves and also to just give a small recap for those that weren't here yesterday of what they were discussing. No, sorry. Sorry. It was like garbage from that set. Reminder.
I'll start with Professor Dr. Scott MacKenzie.
Well, one of the many disgusting things we talked about last night. Okay, my name's Scott MacKenzie. I'm a professor of film and media and currently head of the department at Queen's University. And for the last decade, my work has been on visualizing climate change in the global circumpolar Arctic, looking at the ways in which scientists, activists, explorers, and artists make images about things like resource extraction, climate change, indigeneity, and a lot about melting ice, really. And so, and the ways in which it's so difficult to see, and yet how important it is in our current environment. So that's a little about me. And Bill?
My name is Bill Nelson, so I'm a population ecologist, a biologist, and my own research is looking at insect population dynamics as they go up and down and what causes that. And I spend a lot of my time developing mathematical models and doing experiments with insects to try and understand how all that works. I'm mostly the Associate Dean for Teaching and Learning in the Faculty of Arts and Science.
The recap? The recap?
The recap, we didn't do
Of last night?
Yeah, you start.
Okay.
We presented we presented together, just so those who weren't there yesterday.
Yeah. Now it all makes sense, I'm sure. Okay, so last night, Bill and I were talking about two types of scientific and visualization, the spectacular and the metrical, the different ways science and science communities visualize sciences, especially around climate change. And then we talked about the ways in which artificial intelligence, through image making and data processing, can create both more compelling and more scientifically rigorous images in order to reach out to multiple communities about the importance of climate change and its mitigation.
And some of the things that you hear tonight in this Q&A is how much AI is permeated into the sciences and the humanities. And what we're really talking about is how we take advantage of that and use it to build the bridges where in some of the places we have challenges bridging that right now.
Thank you. Samuel?
Hi, everyone. I'm Samuel Dahan. I'm a law professor at Queen's Law. I'm the co-founder of Open Justice, which is a project that was initiated by the Conflict Analytics Lab, CAL for the students, at Queen's University. We talked about it. So what I do at Queen's, I work on building AI for law and conflict resolution. We're trying to find ways. We've been working on this for the last 10 years. So we've been trying to build a community of legal professionals to help them to build their own AI. So that's really what we talked about yesterday. One of the main issues today for both lawyers and what we call lawyers, which is not a great term, unrepresented litigants. I think another, in French, it sounds a little bit sexier, it's called justiciable, but we don't have an equivalent in English. Anyway, so a lot of them have been using ChatGPT and Copilot to submit court claims. And a lot of lawyers also have been using GPT. And the problem is that a lot of them have been using court claims full of fabricated cases. So that's what AI researchers and computer scientists, now become a more democratized term called hallucinations. So what we've been trying to do over the last now 4 years is to design a system we call it AI creation platform. It's an open source system where legal professionals, so experts, can design their own custom AI in plain language. So there's a bit of a complexities around AI research, around the question of building AI in plain language. And machines are very good at talking to each other in codes, but they're not really good at letting humans build stuff. So we're trying to take the problem from the different perspective. We've been looking at the problem from a user standpoint. Basically, when a machine gives you an answer, it gives a thumbs up, a thumbs down. But we realize that's definitely not enough. And the idea of using data, just legal data, to refine an AI is just not going to be enough. The machine is not going to be magically smart or understanding legal reasoning just because you give it data. It's a little bit like teaching law. Giving students a textbook is definitely a step in the right direction, but you need a little bit more. So One of the main tools and AI algorithms that we've been building is what we call an AI conversion system. It's basically helping machines to understand human languages. And it's not only English, it also works in French and other languages to integrate legal reasoning into language models. And so now the platform has about 20,000 users per month, and we're growing in other legal systems. So kind of happy today we signed a partnership with the French Supreme Court and the European Court of Human Rights to build a specialized AI in these areas. So that's what we've been working on, that we talked about yesterday.
Atlanta Day. Hello, everyone. My name is Haley Crooks, and I'm a third-year law student at Queen's University. I did not present any research last night, but I did get to see these amazing professors present their work. But I'm honored to be sitting here as the Queen's Law Student Society president.
Great, thank you very much. Let's kick off the questions on the legal side. Look, we've seen incredible amounts of development. I cover Thomson Reuters, so Lexis, some of these databases, they've been trying to integrate GPT there to kind of resolve some of these issues. But, you know, it's still the same economic model. I've got to go to a lawyer, then the lawyer does the legal search. And, you know, how do we really open up this system? I mean, we've got to sort of marry the people that need the legal system, that may not be able to afford the legal system. How do we really democratize this? How do we give them proper access to the data, proper services? And more importantly, Samuel, you know, you talked about this on an international context as well, which I thought, you know, you mentioned France, but there's just potential contributions from so many other regions and et cetera. So I'd just love to have you expand on how we can open up the legal system here. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Yes, so the legal community and vendors, and that's not only true in law, it's also true in accounting, medicine. I think when ChatGPT was released, so GPT 3.5 was released, I mean, language models has been a sexy topic for quite a while in computer science, but the major breakthrough was 2022 that most of you know. But so one short answer is that you're still going to be needing lawyers more than ever, actually. Because what we realize is the main problem, even if you create the smartest AI in the world, is people don't know how to ask questions. I mean, they don't know. Go to the doctor, you don't know how. You know how to explain where it hurts, so that's how it solves your problem. Same thing with law. So when you let people use GPT or even Lexis AI or Open Justice, it makes a lot of mistakes. I mean, the recent Stanford AI study shows that a lot of, I'm not going to name any products, but the hallucination rate for specialized AI is still close to 60 to 88%. So that's a lot. That we're not talking about a 90% accuracy rate. We're talking about an 80% hallucination rate. Yeah, so that's a lot.
60% of the time, it's going to hallucinate.
All the way up to 88%.
Wow.
There are more complicated problems we found out. For example, another study shows that there's this new problem. It's not so new, but I'm sure psychologists know about it. It's called counterfactual reasoning. So for example, if you ask GPT, did Ruth Ginsburg dissent on the Obergefell case, same-sex marriage, the machine will go on and say, yes, it did dissent, and will come up with very smart dissenting argument style. And then you go on and on, but the reality is she never dissented. So it goes into a very deep rabbit hole because it doesn't know how to challenge you. So the real question we're talking about with Ali earlier is that, yes, you can create a very smart AI, but if you don't know how to train the machine to ask follow-up questions, like a lawyer would do it, because that's how, the client interaction. We talked about yesterday the fact that GPT passed the bar, it scored in the top 10%, but it doesn't say much about lawyering skills. Or it says something about the bar exam. I don't know. There are a lot of open questions about, and it's not, it's a real problem for us as legal educators. But I think this is really where it's missing, and I think what we're trying to do with our work is trying to instill that experience into the system and how we get lawyers to become creators. And obviously, I'm not a big fan of people who are trying to do everything at the same time. So I don't think we should be training lawyers to become also computer scientists. I think it's already hard enough to be a lawyer, a decent one. So So the idea is that lawyers will be building AI in plain language. You won't be needing code, but it's a whole process. You need to educate people. There's a literacy process that needs to be implemented.
Well, that's great. It's funny, we were evaluating one of the latest reasoning models, DeepSeek, came out of China. And this has just caused revolutions here because it's absolutely amazing. But I was laughing at your hallucination because we were asking it some test questions, and if it's ambiguous, it goes into Woody Allen mode, okay? It just starts repeating, a rock? I don't understand. Why a rock is a rock, you know? Goes on for pages anyway, so it's absolutely. So not ready yet. But let's continue on this topic of AI and law, and more importantly, love to get Haley's perspective. I mean, this can be very disruptive. This can actually transform the industry. You know, what are people who are law students now thinking about this? What are they thinking about law? How it will be applied in the future? What's going to change? We're on the cusp of the new industrial revolution in terms of applications with AI, and law is always cited as like this is going to be the one that gets disrupted. So I'd love to hear your comments there. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm in my third and final year, and so I've definitely seen the evolution of how AI has impacted my education. Starting off in first year, I feel like there's this really big fear of using AI in the sense that you're kind of learning a new language, you're learning how to do like legal reasoning, critical thinking, and AI isn't necessarily the best at helping with that, and it doesn't really help you like improve at all, or it kind of cites like fake cases. And so I definitely stayed away in my first year, and then I kind of saw this like shift in second year. Even in syllabuses, profs are now kind of encouraging or saying that it's okay to use AI as long as you're following like academic integrity policies or citing properly. And so now that I see that, you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, now that it's like a little more like accepted, you're kind of trying to figure out how to work that into your life and how it can maybe help you. And so I guess as a student, how I've seen is I definitely think it helps with research, it helps with time management, and also access to information. Sometimes even now, if you go in Google and you ask it a question, it'll auto-populate an AI response with links to different things, even like to court websites. And so that has been really great. In terms of time management, I have multiple 25-page papers, I have factums due, I have oral advocacy assignments, and so when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I can input all of that in, and it'll help me set like deadlines for myself. It'll help me create kind of like a research plan or plan for presentations. And some of my friends even use it as a therapist to talk to. I feel like in law, sometimes there is a competitive environment. And so if you are trying to like write a paper, sometimes it is nice to kind of have that to like bounce your ideas off of, because sometimes your peers, even though they are your peers, they might not be in that class and might not know the area of law that you're working in. And so it has been helpful in that way. But I think especially this year, I have seen even greater improvements, especially on, so I guess if you're not in a law, if you're looking for case law, like the main places we go for resources are Lexis, Westlaw, and Canley, and I've seen that in the past few months. Lexis now has an AI feature which you can type in, and it'll help you find cases. You can ask it like legal questions, you can ask it to help draft a memo, and even Canley now has an AI feature that will summarize case law, and so that has been really helpful for assignments as a student. So yeah, it's been really beneficial and helped make things easier, and I feel like as a student, we don't necessarily see it that much. It's kind of more this like topic of conversation. And so I am currently doing a placement at the family court in Kingston. And so when we've had all these conversations about how AI can improve the legal field, it's definitely very cool, especially that you're working on open justice, because in family court, there are so many self-represented litigants, and sometimes it would be really helpful to them if they could go somewhere to get help with, drafting factums or drafting documents like that. So I definitely think AI will be really helpful for law students, practitioners, and self-reps.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, what Haley is saying is making me think about, your first question, which I only answered partially, is the impact on the legal community and also whether it's going to help to open up the system. So first answer is that lawyers are still going to be there, and they're definitely not, if they're affected. I mean, a lot of people have been saying this is going to cause a lot of lawyers displacement. I really don't believe in that. I think it's quite the opposite. It's actually making lawyers even more relevant, but not the one you think. The solo practitioners, I think, and it echoes what a few of the AI leaders like Altman and others have said. I think we're going to be, they're claiming that we're going to be seeing the first one-person unicorn. So basically someone running their company on their own. And I think a related claim is that the major breakthrough with this new technology, only if it is made accessible to the vast legal community, is that it's going to change the life of the solo practitioners, because now they can do much more than they used to do. And the larger firm, I'm not saying the larger firm are going to be benefiting from a different perspective. I think larger firms have their competitive advantage back in the day was pace. They can do stuff very quickly. Now I guess, an AI can do things very fast. So I guess you can't compete on that. But now I think what's very interesting is that they're sitting on a lot of very interesting data. And I think from a lot of people, in the outside world, you think law is the grail, like the holy grail. Okay, but the reality of law is that 90% of disputes are settled. Most of the stuff is transaction. So a lot of these firms, where they're going to be building on their competitive advantage is building custom stuff based harnessing their own data. That's fine. But for the solo practitioners, it's going to be a massive change because they don't have an army of associates, and they're going to be able to do much more with very little resources. So I think it's very, and eventually serve more people. That's really what, that would be probably important.
No, I agree. As an AI coder and someone who does investments, the running joke I have is I've been trying to write code to replace myself for 7 years now. And sadly, I still have to work at my job, so don't tell my boss. So no, it's a productivity tool, I think, for professional associations. People still want the human in the loop. And it's good at certain tasks, and humans are better at certain tasks. And I think, again, the 60% hallucinations is probably, I don't think so. But on the topic of productivity, on the topic of tool use, one of the amazing applications is in the realm of science, where just some incredible visualizations and some modeling. So I'm going to pass it over to Bill to talk about AI's application in science. Thank you.
And like we've been talking about here, AI is everywhere in science. And like we've been talking about as well, it's not going to replace a scientist, but it really is at every step of the scientific process. Sometimes AI is being used right at the data collection site. Imagine particle accelerators as an example. You collide atoms together or particles together, you do it at high speed, you have a tremendous amount of data that comes into those detectors, and you're looking for rare events, really tiny signals. There's so much data coming out, you cannot store it, and you've got to find a way to filter that noise out so you can find the rare events. We used to do it with hardware, kind of tuning the right voltages and things like that. AI does all of that now. And so we trained AI to do it, but think what that means. You're excluding information to find the thing you're looking for. AI is central in the data collection side of it. So that's just an example of it. Sometimes it's used as an assistant. So an example might be in pharmaceuticals, where you're trying to look for off-label use of drugs, where there's information from trials that are there, and you're trying to say, can I use that to apply it to a cancer that I never was thought of before? And these are already approved drugs. And you could go through that yourself, but it would take you a long time. And so AI is being used to basically narrow down the candidate list for you so that you can target your energy on a smaller number of drugs to try and do studies with that. So it's working alongside you. And then sometimes it's actually being used into what we traditionally think is the scientist. Our role is to take a complex world and to try and say, these are the primary things we need to focus on. This is what's driving the patterns that we see. So we gave an example yesterday about modeling a glacier, where the physics processes that get about how snow falls and accumulates in ice, how the pressure's formed, and how ice flows down the valleys, that the pure physics models and all their complexity could not get it right. So you trained AI on it, and it was able to get it right. And what it was doing behind the scenes is it's saying these processes are more important than the others. It is basically going through the process that we might do as a scientist to get at abstraction. And so there's a role for AI in abstraction we're still using it in a correct way, but it's really stepping into the area we think as a scientist. We're not going to lose scientists. We still need to work it and use it as a tool, but it's filling very diverse roles in the scientific process.
Well, thank you, Bill. I love the visualizations from last night, the scientific ones. I would just add as well that we had this pre-roll yesterday, which was archival footage that the Queen's Media had restored from all of the other alumni years. Anyone here could have been in there. I was fortunately not in there. So, but this is a great example of AI's application in the media realm as well. And with that, I'll pass it over to Scott.
Thanks, Malcolm. So when people talk about AI, I think there's a bunch of misconceptions we need to get through, and these aren't conceptually difficult to deal with. One is AI is many things. It's not one simple tool, right? Another is there's lots and lots of folks that have fears of it and what it's going to be, right? But most profoundly, what AI is a form of media. Now that may make it seem, safer, but we need to think about what media is too. In our contemporary world, media is everywhere. You carry media in your pocket. You're surveilled as you walk down the street. There are signs everywhere. If you get an MRI, that is media, right? They're mediated images of the world, sometimes showing something that exists, and sometimes showing an abstraction of something that exists. But in contemporary society, you can no easier escape media than you can escape language, right? Language is everywhere. Language is how we understand the world, with the possible exception of adding mathematics in there. Media is in the I have a good math friend, so, and he'll tell me it's poetry. So media is the same. It suffuses everywhere. It crosses all the disciplines that we have almost in the Faculty of Arts and Science at Queen's. It crosses, artists, creative producers, propaganda, news media, misinformation, the internet. It's everywhere. And so before we get too freaked out about what AI is going to do, we need to understand two things: that it's an extension of media, and we're subsumed in media anyways. And so taking some sort of no, this is too much, stop, is not going to work. We're products of media. So what does AI add to this? Well, one of the things it adds in terms of media is the type of stuff that Bill and I were talking about last night. The ways in which to engage in scientific communication to non-scientists to make arguments and claims that are both emotionally compelling and empirically driven in order to engage with the biggest topics of the day. But also, if we look at the images that were in the other room last night, the ones Malcolm was referring to from Queen's, you can see that they were still black and white images from the archive that were then animated via AI so that they moved, right? Taking data out of, first of all, digitalizing the image, because they were mostly black and white analog photos, digitalizing those and then extrapolating movement from that. And so that both animates or reanimates this moment in the past, bringing it back to life, and creates an entire fiction at the same time of something that didn't happen. And that shouldn't be scary, right? That should be compelling, because as time passes, AI will get better, but we will also, as we have with all media technologies, get better at not just using it, but understanding its uses, right? And being able to read images. Recently, and there's a lot of light in here, I'm trying to gauge the age, but this seems an appropriate example. Peter Jackson restored footage of the Beatles from 1970, from a film called Get Back, or well, Let It Be. It became Get Back, and these images were advertised as being there was more than even being there. These images were even better than being in the room itself, man. And it's true that these images now had more data in them than is actually in the source material, right? But we shouldn't be afraid of that. Again, one of the main things AI can do in the sciences and the humanities working together in the public sphere in terms of making this world a better place, and this is a sentence or phrase that Bill and I use a lot, making the invisible visible. So much of our world we can't actually see, whether it's ideas or things that happen in science or philosophical and critical concepts. AI can work with these in the media to make them visible, to make them apparent, And when things become apparent, they can be discussed and debated. Problems can be solved. Things can move forward. Now, I'm making a big claim here because, and my dean is in the room, and I am basically saying media is everything. Forget about the other 29 disciplines in FAS. But he knows me better than that I would not be so crass in a moment like this. But instead, for us to think critically, first of all, about how we are surrounded and use media and control it every day. I mean, we have AI generators in our pockets, right? And so get past the fear to think about the ways in which this process of making the visible invisible in universities, in business, in public life, in law, can flourish for the greater good. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Let's try and tie all these themes together. Let's try and tie law. Let's try and tie media. Let's try and tie AI together, visualizations. I've got this thought here, Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, yeah, because, look, as you know, for that film class that we hosted a while ago, we actually came up with this concept that we thought AI could generate a production film in 3 years, and it actually is generating production-like quality much sooner. But this begs the issue, whose intellectual property is this? Who has the rights to this? What's copyright? It's just upending much of our traditional legal constraints here. And then who actually has ownership of this? And of course, Taylor Swift went after the industry just in terms of rights protection. I could go on about Taylor Swift all night, but I'm going to actually let Haley go on because she took the Taylor Swift course at Queen's.
Yeah, so I'm one of the lucky few who are able to take the first ever Law Taylor's version taught by Professor MacKenzie. And so I am sorry to disappoint, but the course isn't actually about Taylor Swift. It's more of a broad overview of how law intersects within the music industry. And so Taylor Swift is mentioned in a lot of the cases and a lot of the units that we touch on. And so we kind of started off by looking at music and the law. And so there are different rights associated with the composition versus the sound recordings. And so this is kind of where Taylor Swift kind of came in the sense that, for those of you who don't know, Taylor Swift signed with Big Machine Records when she was really young, and there was a large legal battle that she was trying to get out of. And so because she does have all the rights to the composition, because she wrote her own songs, she wrote the chords and all of that, she was able to kind of get out and re-record all of her songs so that she's able to own her own masters. And so kind of then moving away from that, we looked at record deals and contracts. We talked about copyright and substantial similarity. We looked at privacy rights, publicity rights, trademarks, competition law in ticket sales, the primary and secondary market, and the monopoly that Ticketmaster has on all of us. And then lastly, we kind of looked at AI and deep fakes. And so if this is the first time you're hearing the term deepfake, a deepfake is any type of media, video, image, sound, that replaces the likeliness of a person convincingly with that of someone else. It's often used maliciously to show someone doing something that they did not do. And so in the context of Taylor Swift, there have been deepfakes of sexually explicit images. There have also been kind of promotional materials for Donald Trump, which are fake. And so, some of the negative impacts of these AI deepfakes are either exploitation, sabotage, or trying to, alter the democratic process. But I don't mean to scare any of you with that, as there are some positive implications of AI as well. AI and deepfakes can be used for education, it can be used for art, or creating kind of these avatar experiences. And one of those positive examples of AI deepfakes was David Beckham consensually. His likeliness was used to share the stories of malaria survivors in multiple different languages. And so this is kind of, a positive way that it's used to spread information, as his likeliness can reach a larger audience and kind of get this really important message across. And so kind of going back to maybe some of the ethical and social legal considerations of AI in these deepfakes are, in terms of the ethical ones, I think the main and one of the most biggest concerns is ethical in terms of bias and fairness. a lot of these AI systems have either been created or like the data entered may contain biases. And so in kind of like the entertainment industry, if people are using these softwares to create, maybe like scripts or little short films, if there are biases within these softwares, this could create kind of harmful stereotypes that may, they may harm people, and, they could be reflect poorly on maybe these negative stereotypes on, religion, race, and things like that, that could be really harmful. And I guess leading into kind of the social considerations of this is that a lot of times now it's really difficult to tell what's real and what's fake and what's a AI-generated image. And because of that, it's actually fake news travels faster than real news and does reach a lot more people. And so this is kind of a concern, because what happens then when these images are harmful and when they spread, who is then responsible, or where does the liability lie on? Is it on the AI, like the actual software? Is it on the AI creator, or is it on the person who created the AI system? Because these harmful images, now they're out there, and so how do we control either taking them down? And there's different then rights or legal implications that are associated with this. There's also the intellectual property rights aspect of who owns the intellectual property of AI, or like AI-generated images. Is the person who created them, is it the AI, or is it the person who created the AI system? So I think there's a lot to think about, and if anyone else wants to jump on
no,
these, that'd be
absolutely.
great.
For the film class, I tried to be Tom Cruise, and the AI said, "You're not Tom Cruise, so you can't be Tom Cruise." I thought that was good. Again, the self-regulatory, but I love the Beckham story. That's a phenomenal story. But speaking of stories, we'd like to put it back to the audience. We'd like to hear your story. We'd like to hear your questions. Please, what would you like to ask this panel? Perfect. I do. I get to do the Phil Donahue talk show. Here you go.
I'm sitting here in the room here and thinking about the context of this whole evening, and we've got the law side saying, there's gaps between where AI has surged into the public domain and where, law sits and policy sits in governing that. And then we have climate scientists on the other side who, are saying it's a very valuable tool for their research. And yet there's this gap around energy policy, and these are enormous data centers that are consuming enormous amounts of energy. The clean energy progress that we've made is getting sucked up by this surge of technology that's happening right now. So how do we reconcile like the future that we want in this context? We've got AI, we've got law, we've got research, climate change, wicked, wicked problems, and in the center of it is energy that has to power it all. And how do we solve that? I think that's the elephant in the room here.
Excellent question. Panel?
Well, we don't reconcile it, right? Now, what I mean by that is that, and Bill can talk to some of the ways in which the reduction that he talked about last night, the reduction amount of time for calculation versus, the server energy. But as it uses a lot of energy over time, it'll probably use less. As someone who's dedicated a lot of my research time to climate change and its mitigation, I'm conscientious of this. But I'm also aware that it's here to stay, right? So the answer is not let's just not use it and things will get better, right? And so we need to be conscious of the damage it can do to the climate, and the damage it could do to not just say creators' rights or artists' rights, but also personal privacy rights, right? As were being discussed. But at the same time, and this is what Bill and I were really on about last night in terms of bringing the sciences and the humanities together, not letting all of the stuff that could be seen as negative about it, right, build a narrative around it that means it cannot be a catalyst for other things, right? It's a tool, And like with any tool, you can do good things with it and bad things with it. And so it's context specific. And I mean, one of the ways Bill and I talk about it is, in the science side, how do you set up a frame? And then once you have that frame, certain things follow from it. And so we need to be careful about how we think of the frame of AI and how it's being used in different ways. But
Yeah, I'll build a little on what Stott was talking about places where it might benefit us. So the example we had yesterday, we showed a glacier where the physics of how a glacier flowed through a mountain valley was really high resolution, and it was green colors. Those greens were the velocity of the ice, and so it contained the information about the science. That took about 2.5 days to generate, to simulate on a cluster. The equivalent mathematical models that were not getting it right took about 2.5 years. So there are places where AI is able to gloss over a whole bunch of details, and so it takes a while to train it, but the ability to simulate can be a lot less than other things we're using right now. Another area, and I'm not an expert in this, but it's a place where I've seen some studies on it, is when we think of climate modeling. Those computational models are enormous. The more that we can take pieces of it and use AI to help abstract it and make it simpler, the better. There are opportunities to reduce the computational efficiency, and like Scott says, it does count on us as large communities of researchers and users to be able to think of, imagine and use it wisely, and then imagine a future where it gets more and more efficient. There's a bit down the road, but there's also things like quantum computing, things like that may come in at a time when AI is really taking off. Depends on the timing of those two things. So it's not necessarily will end in a place where the demand on the energy demand is so high, it becomes really hard to argue that it should be useful. It might be that things are happening along the way that ameliorate to some effect. But your point is right. Like, we have to keep that front and center as we do our research and work.
Your point is right, and we are going to see electrification in the grid. I would remind you, actually, DeepMind, which solved the protein drug discovery problem, they were in Toronto last year, and actually they said their next project is fusion energy. So as much as these tools can be abused in terms of deepfakes, they might be the tool discovering some much cleaner energy generation options. I'd refer to the DeepMind in that sort, but absolutely, your points are excellent. Yes, if we could open it up to, so, wow, this is good. I don't have to walk very far at all.
I'm a high school teacher, so I'm on the front lines of lots and lots of students who aren't positioned to get into higher education institutions like Queen's University. So what comes up for me is the privilege that all of us in this room possess with our higher educations and our critical thinking skills, most of which we achieved even before we got to law school, which is what got us into law school. Not me, but Haley. And so I have greater cynicism than all of you about AI because I see untrained, uncritical, still developing minds using it as a crutch. And as leaders in the educational community, do you have any suggestions, insights, or policy recommendations to help educators, such as myself, prepare students to actually make it into a university like Queen's?
I can take some of that if that's okay. Those are great questions. So I think I said this briefly at the beginning, Associate Dean for Teaching and Learning. And so we spend a lot of time talking about exactly this problem. In short, I don't have good guidance for you, but I can help frame places where I think there's challenges and places where I think there's opportunities. So we struggle, like you, but I appreciate what you're saying about the difference in resourcing and the ability to put resources into teaching and learning. We struggle with helping navigate it and have our students learn how to use AI wisely, not as a crutch. And so right now, in the way we think of how courses are designed, there's a lot of opportunity for that. And so we are at that early phase of trying to think through that. At the same time, there are those who are experts in pedagogy, and they are pushing the AI can offer some solutions if we start to think differently about teaching and learning. So some examples of it, AI tutoring. Publications right now, the textbook publishers, they are generating AI tutors that go alongside the material, and there's some research to show that it is better than group learning, and it is almost as good as one-on-one tutoring. Now, there's lots of assumptions in that, but it's promising. There are things that we do in the classroom right now where a lot of onus is on the student to go and learn the material. If any of you are teachers in higher ed or in high school, you might hear flipped classroom design, where you send students out to learn some material on their own, you give them ways to reflect on their learning, and then ways that they can improve on themselves. What we miss as educators is the opportunity to tailor that. It's hard for us in a classroom of 25, 30, 100 students to be able to say, I'd like to give you something a little different and you something a little different. AI can do that in material that is accessible for students to navigate on their own, because it can feed back based on how they're doing. Here, you need to learn a little bit of this, and then we're going to provide material and test again and get that feedback going. It's not going to replace us as teachers. In terms of teachers, we're still going to be needed just in the age of, I'm thinking back of this as reflecting on this event, back in the age of the internet. I took undergraduate courses in biology. They were all about taxonomy, and because I'll admit, I shouldn't say this publicly, but I don't like taxonomy all that much. And so I had to memorize plants and phylogenies and things like that. The internet came along and those courses have disappeared. So they're gone. But us as academics and our critical thinking that we're doing, that how to teach students to problem solve, recognize the limits of their own understanding, that is still as important and as powerful as it ever has been. So I don't worry about the future. I think there might be a bit of a revolution in what's in the classroom. When say we look back 10 years from now, and we'll adjust to the world and having AI and teaching students how to use it and having it facilitate teaching, it'll look different, but our role as teachers is still going to be there. Now, that being all said, how we get there is going to be difficult, and we don't have straightforward answers for a lot of it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, no, again, I think we're seeing AI it's a tool. You can use it poorly. You can use it. I always say it's like nitrogen. You know, we can use it as a fertilizer to feed everyone or make chemical things that go boom. So I would like to continue to open it up here. Oh, great. You've got a question in the back.
I have a question to build off the mild cynicism of the person before me. Can you comment on the state of how AI is kind of replacing humans in interactions, right? So like AI is basically becoming a surrogate or a proxy. And I have two examples of that, if you allow me to be vulnerable. So I work in an organization where I manage engineers, right? Software developers. Every year you have a performance review process, right? So you've got a document, you've got goals, you got to fill them out, then I provide my comments, and then we file it with HR, they take a look at it, and it goes into some file somewhere, right? So now with AI, I'm seeing that my developers are leveraging Copilot or ChatGPT to write very eloquent responses to every goal that we've set. And I read it, right? And I can clearly tell that this is AI. So then I, in turn, am putting this into Copilot, providing responses to every single point that they're making. But now this is becoming a proxy war, if you will, right? Where the employee is providing feedback, leveraging AI. I'm then having to go and do that, right? Another example is, I was at Elevate, the conference earlier this year, and they had a workshop, a masterclass on how to get hired, right? So everything from how to use AI to basically build your resume and how to ship that off, right? And basically ship that off in a way that you will get callbacks. What's happening is they're leveraging these new technologies to craft that resume, but then we know that employers are leveraging AI to filter out resumes, right, that don't fit. So again, it's turning into like a proxy war of like which AI is gonna, best the other one, right? So these are kind of two situations where we're using AI as surrogates. So like, do you have any thoughts on like this race to the kind of like AI, supremacy, right, on both sides of the equation?
Well, I have lots of comments here. So you're exactly right. In fact, I met a firm that was doing HR hiring, and they were boasting about, hey, we can read 2,000 resumes. They're trying to hire nurses, which are very hard to hire, people know. And we can look at successful hires. We can semantically compare them. These were hires that worked, and then say, what is semantically similar to this, right? And these resumes, reduce that pile. They can then automatically interview these people through a bot. and then ask them questions, and then through the automated answers, they come back and distill that to a top 5. And then they say for the top 5, get a human to call them, but this is your candidate list. And then we're seeing this quite a bit in internet security, which is this whole notion, one of the companies, Proofpoint, said, because people are talking about like cybersecurity breaches because of AI. And haven't seen much of that, but we did see one where it was phishing attempts, it was spammers. And so they said, actually most spam is, as we all know, is written in English. Bad English, by the way. You can still tell. And they said actually you can still tell a phishing attempt because it's just broken, whatever. But the problem is these language models are getting really good. Okay, so they should be getting, but worse for the people in Japan. They were never targeted originally because they didn't know how to actually translate to Japanese. Now they do. And so they've seen a surge in like regions that never got all these amazing, congratulations, you just won, I'm from the IRS. And yeah, they're getting that too, saying, well, IRS, I live in Japan. So, but we're kind of seeing again this sort of like proxy war. If the question is how do we break it, I don't know. On the coding side, there's big productivity gains, so I don't think people are, they're more encouraging it. If I have to spend $300,000 on a programmer, I want them to be more productive. But, to your point, sorry, we were laughing because we were talking about some of the things, and Queens would never do this, but large organizations kind of make you go through these kind of strange exercises where you're kind of doing some of these rote things and reviews, and I think, you're right. People are using AI to answer the questions. My whole job prep, my job review, I use the AI to ask questions about my boss and, how should I respond? And so maybe I think in some cases you're going to have to rethink some of these approaches and what are we really trying to achieve here in this? Because otherwise you're exactly right. We're going to have a proxy war.
There are a few, I don't know the industry of engineering and developers, so I think if there is some task replacement or job displacement, that unfortunately there's nothing we can do about that. But there are two real important questions. I think AI talking to another AI, we're already seeing this in law. If judges, yesterday we talked about it, for those of you who are here, if judges are overwhelmed with AI-generated court submissions, they will need another AI to screen that kind of AI-generated content. Otherwise, that's not humanly possible. So that's once, and when you really think about it very, not far, before ChatGPT, you used Google to prepare for an interview, and the other party used Google. That's a little bit, when you think about it, the method is kind of the same. And that's a little bit shocking to us because I guess an AI is a little bit more intrusive and more aggressive and goes a little bit deeper into the prep or the output, but inherently it's the same thing. I think it was actually a bigger revolution rather than going to the library and get access to books, because now the good thing is that everybody actually has access to some form of basic AI-generated content.
Yeah, no, this will bring up digital agents and a whole pile of things. We have time for one last question.
AI has already been used to simulate voice and pictures and cause hundreds of millions of dollars in false transactions in banks in Europe. It is a nefarious force already. Credit Suisse, you can look at who's out of business now, but you can look at the number of the European banks that have already been defrauded. In fact, there's new legislation which deals specifically with imitating somebody's voice. So that's so there are incredible risks that already exist. Interestingly, Google is now hiring and saying you can't use AI to write your resume. And by the way, we can tell. So they don't like their own process, which we all find kind of mildly humorous. DeepMind is a little late to the party. There are 10 major fusion companies in North America, around the world right now. One outside of Vancouver, which has been using computers for some time doing magnetized pellet fusion simulations, but now AI is allowing them to speed it up. So that's the good. So you've got a couple bads, you've got a couple goods. Then you kind of go down to the impact of what you were speaking of a little earlier. if you've read the Financial Times in the last week, you saw an article where they're looking at the measured reduction in cognitive reasoning capabilities of people because of AI. So it's saying everybody trusts the button. Push the button, get the answer, that looks good to me. And the navigation errors that's made in shipping already that's caused major accidents because people just didn't look, well, the sun really shouldn't be there, it should be on the other side of the ship. And we're gonna let this thing get seared. So there, I keep saying the goods and the bads, but there are a lot of bads as well as the goods, and we have to be open-minded. And when you look at the energy, I'm maybe not as tolerant about it when I look at useless computing. There's great stuff like you're using, but using 5 times the energy to find out the best local pizza place? Does anybody, because that's what Copilot does, between 5 and 10 times the energy to find out that, and it doesn't know, it just goes out and does a consolidation, convince you it knows that it knows something. So I think there's a lot of risks. So I'm going to ask you is like, in science, you have peer reviews, right? You challenge ideas. So if you're building a law model, one law model, it's a good one, it looks really good. Shouldn't there be another law model that looks at that law model, or one model that peer reviews your model and says, they're really not that good? So I know that's more money and more effort, but I think it's necessary.
I think that's a very interesting question. There's parts of that I think I can contribute to, and I'd like to. And I'm going to pull it back to teaching and learning. And so what we found, if you ask AI to help identify AI, it's not very good at it. And so it's got a lot of false positives, and so it's still tricky. There are some flags, hallucinations, there's odd word phrasing and things like that. But because of the nature of the large language models, it's such that it is really hard to detect it. We certainly have had to step away from it in terms of student misconduct, because we can't use AI reliably. The false positives are simply way too high. I'd say in the scientific literature, we're getting it not so much in peer submission that we get contract writing and things like that. That's always happened. It's the same idea. So that's still a human kind of doing the sniff test, like, that doesn't look, fairly quickly to figure out if it's good or not, written by AI or written by a bunch of researchers, because it doesn't pass, well, actually, you left with a nice phrase on it. It doesn't contain the metadata. And so what I mean by that is if you take a scientific study and you ask the question, are you fake or not? All you have to go is a couple layers in and you can find out really quickly, because everything has to make sense. The references have to make sense. You have to provide the data that's the basis for the arguments you're making. If they don't exist or they don't line up, that's really easy to pick out. So I'm not so worried about the peer review process. I think it's still quite robust to it because it contains this kind of metadata in behind the layers that you can't fake. And in terms of teaching and learning and just looking at a product or something like that, the false positives are so high we don't use that. So anyways, just some thoughts in that area.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Well, with that, we'll wrap up the Q&A. Just want to say a few things. First of all, thank you, everyone, for making the time to come here and engage with us, engage with the Queen's community. I hope you had a great evening. Thought-provoking, controversial. We still don't have the answers, but it's just amazing that you're coming out here to look at this innovation and reach out and inform yourself. So thank you for coming to the micro series event, summit event, in its series here. My own personal just point here, just in terms of engagement, I just wanted to tell you the best investment I ever made was as an alumni. I made a donation back to the school to fund a Queen's program, Queen's 450. And this was a class that was designed to teach the students about the disruption and the innovation that was going on in the media, to get them better prepared, and most importantly, on the engagement side, to go out and engage with alumni and for alumni to engage back with the school. I've got to say, it's been 15 years now. It's been a phenomenal success story, and the graduates of that program have been amazing, and they've really paid it forward, and this has become a virtuous engagement. So I'm very proud of that investment here. With that, I'd actually like to introduce the deans to close the event. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Are we singing?
No.
I'm Bob Lemieux. I'm the Dean of Faculty of Arts and Science. It's my colleague, Colleen Flood.
Hello.
Who's Dean of Faculty of Law. And first of all, we want to thank our incredible panel. You guys are awesome. I think what you saw tonight is a reflection of the incredible quality and sophistication of our faculty and students. This is a wonderful representation of what Queens is all about. I want to thank Malcolm for being in the middle. And thank you for talking about the incredible return on your investment into Queens. This is something that we value very much. And again, this is so great to see such a great crowd coming to this event. We're really fortunate to have incredibly passionate and engaged alumni such as all of you. So thank you very much. And Colleen?
Yeah, I want to thank you too. I want to thank all of our advancement team that did such fantastic work organizing the event. So thank you very much to everybody. I just want to reflect on, and Bob and I have talked about this quite a lot, about the power that comes from working across disciplines. And I think you saw this beautifully tonight. Samuel works with folks in computer science and with business, and our law students dream up legal problems that can be solved with big data, and then they work with the folks in business and computer science. They write the code, they get it out the door. I hear from them just what an incredible experience that is. And then your two beautiful symphony of really, it was truly beautiful to explain the marriage of science and art and the power of that, you know, the power that what we can get when we work across the cooling cracks of these disciplines. That is how we solve the wicked problems of the future, and that's where Bob and I, the other deans, and we really want to see Queens go to. I can't but stop to reflect on Haley Crooks. Haley is, I think, the first Indigenous student to be the president of the Law Student Society. She's been an amazing advocate for the students this year and a beautiful presence throughout the entire year. And I'm glad to see that you soaked up all of Professor Kimji's learnings from Taylor Swift course. So, And it's not easy to come out and do these things, you know, so thank you so much, Haley. You did a lovely job. And thanks to all the panelists as well, and to you for coming out. We really appreciate it and hope to see you soon at Queens. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.